Hello and welcome back. Thanks again for watching this week. So, before I get into the global housing crisis or the global housing crash, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to start with Canada's statistics for May. So, Korea just released the national statistics, and things don't look so peachy these days. Canadian housing activity sees another quiet month in May. Of course, as the summer months approach, things slow down again. So let's look at May and how things looked. So I've taken the same data that Korea provides and just added it all now to my own charts instead of using any of theirs. I just find it much easier to work with. So May, the total sales, you can see nothing to write home about here. Seems kind of average. It's probably a little bit below average, but it's not far off. Not too bad for total sales, although our population is a lot higher than it was, say, in 2007 or 2008 when they were very similar to now. Looking at the sales to new listings ratio, this is the market balance, and this is the lowest. It's at 52.6%. So the lowest sales to new listings ratio in the recorded history since 2019 for the month of May. Now, months of inventory, this is where things start to get interesting. So the months of inventory is at 4.4 months, which is now higher than any other month going back all the way until the first part of 2020. So we are going to start seeing those pre-pandemic levels now. Inventory is increasing, which is a great sign for all the buyers out there and the sellers in general. It makes for a healthy market. So adding the trend lines on here, we're seeing higher highs and higher lows, meaning the lows are a lot higher than they used to be. And of course, the highs are getting higher. So it's a good sign. We're getting more inventory in general. Things are trending up and should continue to do so. Now I've isolated May's months of inventory alone for all the years going back to 2010. And you can see still well below all the Mays prior to 2020. But when you look at the most recent years post 2020, it has increased significantly. Last year in May was 3.1 months of inventory. We're now at 4.4 months, which is a 25% increase, actually more like 27% increase over last May. Now looking at the year-over-year price changes for any given month, you can see May there on the bottom right in red is down 4% month over month, a lot higher than it was in April. And April was the first month in about 12 months that we're starting to see year-over-year price declines. The actual average national price for May was just over 699,000, which is down 0.6% month over month from April, or $4,000, down 4% year over year from last May, or $28,000, and down 14.4% from the peak, or $117,000. Now, do keep in mind, this is peak spring season May, so of course, this is not that great for a May or spring season in general. Now I want to get into the global housing situation, more of the Western world I want to compare it to, because that's usually what we're tied up with all these globalist activities these days. And of course, we're seeing very similar themes in all these countries. And this is why when one breaks, they're all going to break, very similar to 2008, but it's going to be more countries involved, in my opinion. And yeah, so keep an eye on the news to hear news from different countries, whether it's England, France, United States, Canada, Australia. One of them is going to break first, and then the rest will follow. And this is how it's going to play out because we're so intertwined. And I'll show you what I mean here. Of course, even the World Economic Forum, our favorite friends over there, they are even talking about it. 4 practical solutions to the world's spiraling housing crisis. They make you believe that it's because there's too many people living in the world and we need to do a better job. But the reality is it's the globalists that have come together to make these plans, and they're just not working out. And here is some evidence of that. So again, back to the Canadian national average price, it peaked in 2022. Early 2022 in our case, and you go to the UK, 2022, the average price peaked. United States, same thing, 2022. I'm like a broken record here. Australia, 2022, big housing bubble over there right now at this point in time. And France, 2022. I could have added more countries like Ireland and Germany and all these places, but it's just too much. I wanted to keep it down to 4 or 5 countries. This is why I focused on these, but they are very representative of what Western countries or what's happening in Western countries right now. And another thing that they're all aligned with and taking their orders on, they're obviously not doing this by themselves. This is a globalist solution they've done to housing and immigration. And of course, now is immigration. So here is Canada, record immigration. Immigration fuels Canada's highest population growth since 1957. Again, this is not just a Canadian issue. This is a Western world global issue. UK net migration in 2022 revised up to record 745,000 people. Of course, 2023 was very similar. In Australia, this was from April 2024, this article, Australia hits highest immigration numbers since days of convict ships. Of course, Australia is a big convict colony, and highest immigration since those days many decades ago. And everybody hears about the US. Migrant encounters at the US Mexico border hit a record high at the end of 2023. So, all these countries very closely aligned when it comes to real estate prices, increased immigration, and now we get into capping immigration because they realize, hey, there's too many immigrants, or we've done our job propping up the economy, propping up GDP, paying for the citizens' retirements that are upcoming because we can't afford to pay for these retirement funds. So, of course, now they have to cap it. The damage has been done. Housing crisis are in full effect. Canada plans to reduce temporary residence, cap future intake. British PM Rishi Sunak vows to cap immigration visas ahead of July election. Australia to cut record high migration as housing crisis bites. New strategy to bring in skilled workers and control migration. We hear very similar stories in Canada, bring in skilled workers and build houses and whatever else. French right toughens up new bill aimed at controlling immigration. France's upper house Senate on Tuesday passed a bill aimed at controlling immigration. And from the US, Biden's new executive order denies asylum claims to most migrants crossing the border unlawfully. So this is all done in tandem, all coordinated through their globalist networks. This is not a coincidence that every country increases immigration, has housing crises and whatnot. And now we get into the housing crisis, which everybody's singing that same song also. Canada's housing crisis is just one of many allocations in the 2024 federal budget. In the UK, how can we tackle the UK's housing crisis? And of course, they talk about with high property prices, rising rents, and sluggish rates of new build, the UK is facing a crisis of housing affordability. Same thing in Canada. It's very similar. It's almost the same wording. Australia's budget is expected to target housing crisis as prices keep climbing. They go on to say Australian home prices are set to keep climbing as the housing supply shortage is compounded by record migration and limited capacity to deliver new builds. You could literally insert any country's name in the headline and it wouldn't change the context of the story. And another one from Australia, and again, insert any country's name in here, it doesn't matter. The Great Divide. Even if millennials could afford a home, there aren't enough to buy. Macron has a big housing headache. Olympics are making it worse. The French government has made tackling the housing crisis a priority in an attempt to improve living conditions for the middle class. And even in the States, which their prices aren't even as bad as, say, Australia's, UK's, or Canada's, they still have a housing crisis and an affordability issue. Biden says he can fix America's housing affordability crisis. Will it work? So we have all these countries aligned in housing crisis, immigration problems, cutting back immigration, interest rate hikes, interest rate cuts. They're all in tandem, working together. And of course, when you blame the government, when we blame our government and say, look, it's your fault for inflation or it's your fault for the housing crisis, they will literally turn around and say it's a global problem. Here's one from Chrystia Freeland, where she very clearly said, inflation, a global issue, not a made in Canada phenomenon. So they're saying this is a global issue, but the problem is they're the globalists that engineered this, and Canada's involved, highly involved. They're like the leader. They strive to be the leader with this current government to be, set an example for the rest of the world. And we're in everything. So when they say this is it's not a Canadian issue, it's a global issue. No, it's their fault. They're the ones that push these agendas, the global agendas on Canada, on the States, on UK, and all these other countries. Here's just a quick list of the most recent ones they've been in, starting with the environment. Guilbeault hails monumental COP28 deal. Others warn of dangerous distractions. So, of course, he's the environmental extremist pushing his global environmental agenda, hurting Canadian jobs and hurting the Canadian economy, using fear to push that agenda, just like a realtor pushes FOMO to buy a house. Here's another one from our most recent global summit with Trudeau, and he was just at home. He loves to get away because he doesn't have Canadians yelling at him that they hate him. So he goes there. He feels like he's saving the world, but he's not helping anyone. Actually hurting Canadians. But of course, Canada contributing $5 billion to the new G7 deal being finalized to help Ukraine using frozen Russian assets. So this $5 billion is just one of many supports he's given out to other countries. And again, I'm not against these other countries, but I'm Canadian first, and $4 billion to the Housing Accelerator Fund, but $5 billion with no warning. He just goes over there and hey, $5 billion. Well, we need homes built here, and we only got $4 billion over 3 years, and he's giving out $5 billion on top of whatever else he's given out for these wars in other countries. And of course, the G20, he didn't look so great there. Trudeau leaves India after aircraft issues, delayed departure from rocky G20. Again, out there trying to serve the world, not Canadians. And of course, Freeland on the board at the WEF, goes there every winter. She's blaming global inflation for things in Canada, but she's literally part of the problem because she's part of the board at the WEF. So, yeah, it's kind of ironic that she's blaming that, but she's technically blaming herself, which is, in my opinion, the right person to blame. And listen to what the IMF has to say about our new capital gains tax increase. So, capital gains tax hike a start, but Canada needs more revenue, IMF says. Measure to improve systems neutrality, but more needed. So the IMF is sitting there, and of course, who do you think controls the IMF? The globalists, and they're rating Canada on how much they tax our citizens, and they say we got to tax them more, actually. So again, is this Canada? Did this capital gains tax increase? Was it a born in Canada solution, or was this passed down from a globalist monetary fund? I'm starting to think it came down from the father figure from the top here. And of course, who couldn't leave out the WHO Global Pandemic Treaty, which of course Canada is more than happy to jump in with. So, of course, everything is controlled by these globalists in Canada and many other countries. And they're going to turn around and say, well, hey, this is a global problem. This isn't just a Canadian problem. But again, it's been engineered by us, but we're not going to tell you that part. So, of course, when one breaks, they're all going to break. Maybe it'll be real estate first. Maybe it'll be the currency first. Who knows? But it's brewing. You can only, kick the can down the road so much until something happens. And it looks like we're getting pretty close to that point. You got a lot of crisis in a lot of different sectors right now. Let me know what you think in the comments. But until next week, I'll see you then.